Hi, everybody, and welcome to another really special Wellness Warrior podcast. Today, I have a special guest, Leah Lund, and she's not only a health expert in her field, which I'll talk about in just a second, but she's actually one of us. So she's on that breast cancer healing journey. She's doing fabulously well, and she gets it because she's walked in the same shoes that we have all walked. And so I'm so proud of her for all the work that she's doing, and I'm excited to have her here because she's going to really share some amazing nuggets about our emotional healing. And you all know, with essential number 4, heal the emotional wounds, that's such an important part of the healing. So Leah is the founder of One Whole Health, and she offers coaching, retreats. I love this one. Hashtag I am vibrant, girls weekend getaways. And she teaches people to reboot their brain, to reprogram their subconscious mind, to get clarity, capacity, to have the courage to be your true self, and to really create a life that you love. And we all need that. It's all about changing that subconscious mind. What's at the root that's causing all those issues? She's a speaker, she's a laughter yoga leader, she's done all kinds of amazing things. I love her humanitarian work, which includes the Water Bearers. It's a project to bring clean, safe water to every person in the world. That's amazing. onewholehealth.com is where you could find some information on that. So Leah, thanks for taking the time to be with us today.
Oh, you are so welcome. It's absolutely my pleasure.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to share your story. So, our journeys always take us from our pain becomes our passion. So let's start off there first about, why do you do what you do today?
Yes, so true. So my pain really started at a very young age, and I know now that it was neurotransmitter depletion. I had no idea until well into my 30s before I knew what was going on. But I knew that even as a young girl, I was very worried about big things. I had fairly dark thoughts. I internalized stress, and I was nervous and I was anxious a lot of the time. And I had no idea what that was. And so what does a young person do? They take it on as something that's wrong with them.
Right.
And so then that perpetuated into a lot of thought patterns and belief systems that I carried with me for a very long time. Now, on the outside, I was really successful in the corporate world. And of course, that's part of the mask, right? Is I will work harder than anyone, and I will, give more so that nobody sees what lies underneath. And so I spent a couple decades in corporate America doing leadership training and excelled at that. However, there was always this underlying tension that everything that happened, I took to mean something personal about me, and I internalized all of that stress. And it wasn't until I went to a conference. Well, first of all, I just I not only had the neurotransmitter depletion, but I, of course, in turn, when you run that way for a long time, your adrenals become extremely fatigued. And I had my breakdown, and I had no plan, but I just walked away from my corporate job. Wow. I quit my job. I cashed out a 401k that I don't even want to, think about where it might be, although who knows. And I even ended a 13-year relationship because I was still focused on the thought that, there was something outside causing all of this, right? Mm-hmm. And so I walked away, was surprised to find I actually felt worse when I thought, oh, I'll just feel better now. I felt worse, or what I think it really was is that I had the time to even notice how I felt. And that set me off on a journey. And I ended up going to a conference. This, of course, was over years, probably about 6 years that I was searching for myself. And I went to a conference, and I first heard the term nutritional psychology. And I was just blown away. Like, wait a minute, this has something to do with my food. And it's not just who I am, and it's not a family curse, because of course I was seeing similar patterns in my parents and my grandparents and things of that nature. And that really took me into the world of wellness, and in particular neuronutrition, and it's all just expanded from there.
That's very interesting. I'd never heard that term until I read your bio. So let's talk about, first of all, neurotransmitter depletion. What exactly is that?
Yeah. So we have four types of we have lots of neurotransmitters, but four in particular that are largely responsible for how we feel, from our mood, whether we're optimistic or pessimistic, whether we have energy or not, whether we can, whether we're irritated or depressed or anxious. And then also there are physical effects of either good or poor neurotransmitter levels. And those are things like pain management and our sleep and our gut health and headaches and all kinds of things. And so when when the brain is working as it's designed to, perfect design, the proper food is right here on this planet with our brains, no accident. And when we're getting real whole nutrient dense food and a wide variety of nutrients, and especially the complete proteins, then our brain should make these molecules of these neurotransmitters. And these are things like serotonin and endorphin and maybe less familiar catecholamines, but the parent catecholamine is dopamine, and GABA. Those are the four areas. When the brain has the right ingredients and no interference, it should naturally make a surplus of these molecules. So we feel really good in the moment, but we also store excess molecules in reserve for a rainy day. Literally, in the case of serotonin, if it's a dark and rainy day, we have a reserve to draw on. Or if there's an unforeseen stress, and we have this reserve where it can help us still maintain our balance and resilience and ability to feel an emotion and come back to neutral, and even if there's something really stressful going on. But when we get depleted, we lose all of that. And there can be a whole host of symptoms that we can get into, but I assess 40 different symptoms for my clients that all indicate one of those four categories is depleted.
Wow, wow, wow. So nutrition for NeuroNutrition, you named it. So what would be examples? I know you said, whole foods and nutritious foods, but give us some specific examples.
Sure. And the other term that may be more familiar than neuronutrition is targeted amino acid therapy.
Okay.
So we're really talking about getting the amino acids that the brain uses as raw material to make these brain chemicals. So there are 22 different amino acids, and there are different amino acids that help generate the different chemicals, but they all come from our complete sources of protein. So the optimal protein would be good, clean animal protein, because that does have such high levels of these amino acids. And then the vegetables and the fruits with the wide variety of phytonutrients help the conversion. And of course, getting good fats as well, which is important for the brain in so many different ways, but that all helps this process of the amino acids being converted into the neurotransmitter. So in the targeted amino acid therapy, once a depletion has been identified, we use supplementation for a limited time, for a matter of months, typically, to kind of fill the gap between what your brain has been experiencing and what you've been experiencing and what optimal levels would be. But I want to be quick to point out that the supplementation is for a limited time. So this is a very reparative process. And after, on average, my clients 4 or 5 months that they've been on their specific individualized protocol, they're able to stop the amino acid supplementation, and they still feel as good as they've been feeling since they've been on their protocol.
Interesting. So it's not a ongoing therapy.
Not forever. Yeah. So very different. Yeah. Not to interrupt, but very different from antidepressants, let's say, for depression or anxiety or sleep issues, because that's really bypassing or compensating for and never really restoring our brain's ability to make these neurotransmitters on its own. And I'm sure you find, and feel free to comment, that when they lose efficacy, the answer seems to be higher doses and add another one. Right. And it's a lifelong thing. Whereas when we give the brain the nutrients it actually is designed to use to make serotonin, for example, naturally, then it is a restorative effect, because we fill up those reserve tanks, plus we have a good constant flow for the here and now.
So there's a lot of information we hear about the gut-brain connection. So talk to us, because we know, that serotonin is produced in the gut, right?
Yes.
And it has to be methylated properly to be absorbed. And so talk to us a little bit about the importance of gut health and mental health.
Yeah, so there's a very direct correlation, as you point out. And yes, it's true, the vast majority of our serotonin is actually made in the gut. And we're seeing other neurotransmitters as well. And there's a lot of research showing that there are even specific gut bacteria that erode or eat our GABA, for example. So gut health is essential. The approach that I use is I start first with the neuronutrition and see, because sometimes it's very straightforward and it's very simple, and someone can be feeling very different in a matter of days, for sure, even hours. And then if it's not that straightforward and simple, gut is one of the first places I go to see what might be interfering with this natural process. And so gut health, whether it be the balance of flora or whether it be making sure there's no gut permeability, or making sure there's not damage to the villi. So I call it a happy gut. We look to see, can we have a happy gut? And that means addressing or considering all the different gut imbalance that exists, from IBS to candida to leaky gut, all of that, because it certainly can be a root cause of what has interfered with the neurotransmitter production.
For sure. I love that. Happy gut. That's
Yeah.
good. Now, let's talk about the impact of blocked emotions on illness and disease. Now, I know my community is very familiar with that. Essential number 4, I preach, 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 heal those emotional wounds, because that can cause so much inner conflict, suppress your immune system, and really keep you from healing. So let's talk a little bit about that. What's your view on that?
Yeah, it's another essential component of complete healing. And sometimes I will be working with somebody that is very, very infatuated with the neuronutrition piece, because it sounds almost like that magic bullet, right? That, oh, I can just take these supplements and, all this, my depression will go away and I'll be motivated again and I'll be focused. And to a point, that is true. You will feel, most people, 96% in the case of my practice, feel that really positive shift right away. But it's really important to understand that if you don't look at what led to the depletion in the first place, then it stands to reason that you could repeat the depletion. You could repeat and deplete yourself once again. So if you're not changing behaviors, if you're not changing lifestyle, and if you're not exploring the emotional root causes that led to the depletion in the first place, there's a fairly direct correlation that I want to speak to here, which is that anytime you are not properly processing your emotions, or you're feeling emotions that you don't understand, even when you're conscious of them, and but you're stuffing them, and this happens a lot with food, right? And so cravings are actually a major indicator of neurotransmitter depletion. But when you are not allowing yourself to feel your feelings and not processing them, that is going to be seen by the brain as a stress. Very simply, right? It's a form of stress. And to the brain, all stress is equal stress. It doesn't matter if a car is swerving over into your lane on the freeway and there is a real and present danger, or it's something that you're thinking is stressful, or something that you're avoiding emotionally, and that causes a stress. Stress erodes the brain's ability to make these neurotransmitters. So even when you can intellectually say, oh, I'll deal with that later, or any of the stories our mind comes up with, this erosion of the neurotransmitters is happening. So that's a really direct, there are a few different ways that we become depleted, and stress is a primary way that we become depleted. This stands true, of course. So that's a real direct correlation for neurotransmitter health. But really, our emotion causes so many other issues in our body, so much imbalance, eventually leading to disease, because emotion is energy. And energy must circulate to be healthy. So energy needs to come in, and we need to let it go. Come in and let it go. Come in and let it go. And in the case of stuffing our emotions, it just stays in the body. And that's a real and scientifically proven thing. There's, the study of ACE scores and how that affects us later in life, including susceptibility to physical disease. And it's really been shown that this emotional energy, if it's trapped in our body, it's going to lead to all kinds of physical issues with our health.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, those ACE scores are so indicative. And when I discovered the ACE scores, I think I had, what's the top number? 7, 10?
Well, 4 and above, it
Right.
really is where they track the, but I think there's 10 altogether.
Yeah, so I was like 7 or 8. I mean, I had almost all of them, and it's like no wonder, I was so unhappy and struggled with my health for so long, and like you said, put on a nice mask and pushed forward, but in the end, our body lets us know that we can't do that forever. So that being said, let's talk about your personal healing journey. So how did you first discover that you had breast cancer? Did you find your own lump?
I did. Yeah, I did. And I actually found that lump, and I call it the bump, because I know the importance of language. And so I try to keep neutral, if not light language about everything that I refer to. So I call it the bump and the bumplets. And I try to watch myself so that I don't say my, because I do not want to own it.
Good.
Yeah. So every now and then I slip up, of course, because we're all human. But yeah. So the bump I actually found 5 years ago, and I went to my gynecologist and I had her feel it. And at that point, we were both in agreement and she was especially saying, this really doesn't feel like cancer to me, but go ahead and have it checked out anyway. And at that point, I was referred to a cancer specialist, and the immediate recommendation was a biopsy. And by the way, this is my story and my choices, and we all have a different journey with this. So I really want to say that. And the most important thing is that you believe in your choices, that you trust yourself and higher power, that the choices that you're making, you believe in them 100%, that they're the best thing for you. So this is simply my story and my journey. But so the recommendation was a biopsy. And at the same time, the specialist was saying that there's, in her expert opinion, there's a 5% or less chance that it would be cancer, but let's go ahead and biopsy it anyway. Well, I had read the research about biopsies in some cases spreading cancer. So for me, a 5% or less chance and the possibility that I could spread it if it was, just didn't add up. And so I opted at that point to continue watching it. I had been doing thermal imaging, and that thermal imaging was showing gut inflammation, speaking of, and some inflammation coming from sinuses. And that correlated to, in my teens and 20s, I had a lot of sinus infections, and I, of course, had a lot of antibiotics, unfortunately. And so I said, well, let me see what I can do in my lifestyle choices and controlling that inflammation. And so I really watched it for 5 years. And this past year, last year, about 6 months ago, a little over, it had started to grow. And so I said, okay, I'm going to revisit. And I went to, I'm a nomad. So I went to, I was back home in Colorado as opposed to in California. And so I went to a radiologist in Colorado, and the recommendation was once again biopsy. And I think this is an important thing to mention. I was far enough removed from reading the research, because honestly, I'd sort of put it in the back of my mind. So I was far enough removed from that research about biopsies that in that office that day, I fell into the fear. And I said, okay, yes, okay. And they were very adamant and said, you're not even going to go home and book another appointment. We're going to do this biopsy right here, right now. And I said, okay. And so I did. And thus it was diagnosed. And I had to go through my own process to also let that go and let that be okay, that I had now had this biopsy. And so at that stage, once I knew, they immediately scheduled lumpectomy, and were recommending the radiation after. And I went ahead, I was a little numb in the office that day. I went ahead and scheduled all of that. And when I got home, I said, okay, the thing I know to do is give myself some space to check in with my heart and with what I really feel is best for me. And so I took a couple of days, and I reached out after a couple of days to only a handful of people, because I really understood the importance of managing the fear. And I didn't want fear-based thinking in my world at all. So to be honest, I didn't even tell my parents. My mother's had breast cancer twice and tends to be a little fear-based anyway. So I just said, I have to sort this out for myself in a clear and quiet space before I have too many opinions coming at me.
Good idea. Good idea.
Yes. So I reached out to people I knew would not be fear-based, and also who I knew would give me their honest opinion. And then I started to do my research and found, actually, one of my friends that I initially reached out to mentioned Hope for Cancer. And so I know you bring your retreats there, and that is where I chose to go for my treatment. So I canceled my lumpectomy, canceled all of that, and scheduled my visit for about a month later. One thing everybody was in agreement with from the beginning, in my case, is that it was slow moving. So that was a luxury that I could say, okay, let me take my time, figure out what feels best to me. And I will also say, in deciding about Hope for Cancer, I talked with women who'd actually been there, and that was very helpful. And one of them, who had been there for stage 4 ovarian and is now 2 years cancer-free, mentioned to me that after her initial 3 weeks down there, they had recommended that she have her ovarian tumor removed. And that actually gave me some comfort to know that it was a balanced view, and that if I needed to follow through with those things, they would recommend that. And I was just deciding, because I was at stage 1, I was deciding to go this route initially, and if something else is needed in the future, then I felt very comfortable that they would share that as well. So where I am right now, is about 6 months after, and so far things are shrinking. The bump and the bumplets, there were 3 bumplets, 2 bumplets are gone, and 1 bumplet is at least half the size or smaller, and the largest is showing signs of being under attack by the immune system. The blood markers are actually in the normal range. And so I am doing what I'm doing, which is a fairly involved home protocol, as I'm sure many of your viewers and and it's for the most part things that are great for our health and wellness anyway. So that's where I'm at with it.
Wow, Leah, I'm so proud of you. I mean, it's, I love your approach, because it's very balanced, it's very calm. The sad thing is we have, our first point of contact when women first come to us, they're like deer in headlights, and they're so panicky and so afraid because they don't have a clue, and they're being pressured by their doctors and their families, but something inside of them is telling them, I don't know if I need to do all of that. And of course, we encourage our women. It's not just one way or the other way. It could be a combination of both, and it's being balanced, because ultimately in the end, it's about your life, right? So whatever feels good for you and whatever works for you, test and assess, make sure that you monitor and you see that you're making progress. So great job on your healing. I know it's not easy. I know, but it's, it's so great. It's so empowering, to feel like you can do so many great things for yourself. And yes, you're working with the bumplets, but it's like you say, it's helping your whole body as well.
Absolutely. And it's so much about the terrain. And I know you teach this too. And I had actually, in between diagnosis and before I went down to Mexico, I ran my own lab, gut labs, pathogen labs, and found that I did have a parasite. I did have 2 bacteria. When I got down to Mexico, they found that there were still evidence of mold spores. I'd had a mold exposure 6 years ago, but I thought it was treated. So it really speaks to that environment of the terrain, and the fact that, you know, we all do make cancer cells every day, and it's what our immune system does about it that makes the difference and not. And I also really want to share that your book, within those first 5, the same friend actually that told me about Hope for Cancer told me about your book. And so that was one of the first things I read. And your story, being a health practitioner, was particularly comforting and helpful to me, because I did experience what I am sure is pretty typical for anybody in health and wellness who has this diagnosis. Is I had that guilt, I had that feeling of, oh, I'm going to disappoint everyone. I had those thoughts and feelings of, this isn't supposed to happen to me. And it was just really reading your whole journey, and especially your second diagnosis, that piece of it was just, I can't tell you how comforting to me. So thank you so much for putting that out in the world, because it was so incredibly helpful.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm glad that it was helpful for you.
Yeah.
So you also have a program, a 5-step program, and tell us about how you approach this, you know, the whole aspect of healing with your 5 steps.
Yeah, so our 5 steps are the framework for any of our programs, and including our live retreats. And this applies whether it's a woman that has come to us because of mood-related issues, whether it's a woman that's come to us because of cravings and emotional eating and wanting to balance her weight, or whether it's a woman that's come to us for energy and brain fog and that aspect. Those tend to be sort of the 3 primary areas. But really, it's women who want to feel their best mentally and physically, and so that they can do what they're up to in the world. To me, I never lose sight of the point, right? The point of us feeling so good and being so healthy is that we get to share our gifts and our light and create a life that excites us and that's fulfilling and really serve our purpose on the planet. So that's where the 5 steps come in. And the first is brain, and we've talked all about that. That is absolutely where I start, because it's such a jump start and applies to so many people. Then it's important, number 2, to include the body, because of course our systems in our body, like adrenals, like thyroid, like hormones, like gut, we've mentioned, can be out of balance. And also the body communicates to the brain as much as the brain communicates to the body. So it's really critical that you address both sides of that partnership. Then we shift into building emotional capacity. And it's very, I think, unique and very important why I go to that step even before mastering mindset. And the reason is, I have found that we know that our thoughts create, we know that our thoughts are so important, and yet you can be activating a new positive thought. And what is the most likely thing that will take you out of that thought and bring you back down to more fear-based thinking? That's going to be when you feel that emotion. So when you build your emotional capacity first, when you get comfortable in knowing that your emotions are a beautiful part of your design, and everybody has them, and there's nothing wrong if you're experiencing them, and you can feel them and then eventually release them. And when you can distance the space, you can widen the space between what you feel and what you do. That gives you're so empowered when you have that capacity in that space, because you can feel all the emotions, and then you can make the choice that you really do intend to make, whether it's about food or anything else, from that balanced position and grounded position. You're responding to your emotion, or you're responding in accompaniment of your emotion versus just reacting. That's so powerful. So we do that first, and then we can look at thoughts. And so that's number 4 is mindset mastery. And number 5 is that soul aligned action, because I really think and believe that things have to come full circle to where we're embodying and we're taking action on our dreams, on our purpose, on what we're here to do in this world, that's when everything really locks in on a cellular level. And as I was saying, to me, that's the why and the point of it all. So that's a 5-step framework that all of our programs follow, as well as our retreats.
Love it. Love it. Wonderful work. So tell us where we can find you, and do you have a free gift, I believe? Brain
Yes.
chemistry assessment?
Yes. So you mentioned our website is onewholehealth.com. That's spelled out one, O-N-E, wholehealth.com. And I named the company that because we are One Whole Health. So we've not really touched on this, but energetically, my wellness is your wellness and vice versa. And our energy affects everyone and every living thing. So that's why we're One Whole Health. And we're by that name on all the social media outlets as well. Facebook, our fan page is Leah Lund, the Brain Coach. So Leah Lund or One Whole Health, you search that and you'll find all of our social media. And I do have a self-scoring brain chemistry assessment. I really thought, what is the most valuable thing I could give to the viewers here? And this is the exact assessment that I use in my practice. It is the 40 symptoms of neurotransmitter depletion, and you rate them on a scale of 1 to 10. And anything higher than a 3, it's not the kind of assessment where you add things up and then there's a range. It really take each symptom on its own. If it's a 3, if it's above a 3, that means you're experiencing it quite often and or quite intensely, and know that it really doesn't have to be that way. So that's a good indication that you would benefit greatly from NeuroNutrition. And when you complete that assessment, there is an invitation to speak with me about your assessment if you're interested in taking it further. But either way, you'll have the assessment and you'll know your results.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, we'll post that link once we publish the podcast. So Leah, thank you so much for your time and your expertise. Emotional health is such an important part of healing. So thanks for all that you do and in supporting women around the world.
Thank you, Dr. V. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, till next time, this is Dr. V sending you a big healing heart hug. Bye for now.